Hello and welcome to CIO News. I am Khushbu Soni, a host for the broadcast and chief editor at CIO News. This is our exclusive interview series on the topic of Voice of CIO. This is a recorded session and will be available on our website, that is cionews.co.in, and our CIO News LinkedIn handle. It is my pleasure to introduce our today's guest for this episode. He is Mr. Mohammad Sear, the lecturer on digital government and innovation at Sciences Pro. Mohammed is focused on bringing purpose to digital in government. Mohammed is a thought leader in the areas of digital government, citizen centricity, customer experience, and an advisor to senior leaders in government and the public sector. Anyway, he has obtained leadership training from the Harvard and he has successful, rich years of experience in the UK government during the premiership of the three prime ministers, and he has worked in various regions like UK, Middle East, Australia, Asia, South Asia, and has worked on various strategic challenges and digital transformation. It is an absolute pleasure, Mohammed, today to have you on this episode of CIO News, and it'll be very exciting to learn from you on the strategies that you have learned through your experience, and you can share with our viewers through this platform.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation and happy to share my views and thoughts and see how we can be of value to your audience.
Awesome. Great, Mohammed. So I wanted to begin with putting across my first question to you is, what does your typical day look like? How do you usually start? What does your typical day is?
It could be very different. I mean, it depends on what priorities and what challenges are being faced, because when you are working with different governments in the region and you're also doing some lecturing in Europe and writing articles or doing some research, it really depends on what you have on your priority that particular day. But typically, it's spent around trying to understand what's happening in the world of government, digital government in particular. So I keep myself up to speed with what's happening. I normally post something each day. So I want to find something interesting to share with people. And it's always some good example of what a government is doing, or maybe some challenge that a government is facing on embracing digital technologies. And also I advise and provide some strategic direction to organizations in the Middle East, governmental organizations. So I have ongoing projects which I provide input to. It could be on something at a national level, strategy, digital government, on the digital economy, or it could be a very tactical area where they're trying to improve a service experience. So spending time with the team that is on the ground working with that particular client. And it could be on preparing for my lecture on digital government and innovation, trying to think of some interesting use cases to share with the students and put something together for a discussion so they can really learn from these examples.
Wonderful, great. With your expertise of working for the government, how do you see the future of digital or data-driven of government in the Middle East and North Africa?
So Middle East and North Africa is quite, I wouldn't look at it from homogeneous perspective because you have different levels of strengths of government's maturity, economic positions. So if I look at it as holistically, then certain countries are ahead of the curve. They already have embraced a lot of these technologies and are looking to go to the next level, how to really transform even beyond what they're doing today. And if I look at some of those countries which are generally behind the curve at the moment, they are not considered as mature in the digital government space, then they are at the early stages of setting their strategies and directions and trying to get policies in place and funding in place to drive their transformation. Right. One of the things to maybe keep in mind is that this whole journey of where we stand today, or we at one point in time were operating government in a very physical manner. Everything was manual, right? So we all probably remember those days when we had to go to a physical space, queue up, write something up, fill an application in its physical form and give physical documents. So that was kind of years ago when we were starting off, when government existed. And then we went through this age of what we called e-government, when a lot of government was going online, and mainly to do with how do you apply for services online or at least get information. Today, we're sitting in what's called the digital age or digital government. And I feel that we are now quite ready for looking at the next phase, which is, I like to term it as reimagining governance for the digital age, and where we will see true breakthrough coming. So this region is starting to explore some of these things. And data, as you mentioned, is something that is at the heart of anything and everything we're going to do in the future, because it will drive whether it's decision making or whether it's to do with how do we really drive insights to help us better serve our customers. Data will be at the center, and this region is starting to embrace that, already has, and is starting to embrace that in a very proactive way by establishing data policies or looking at data-driven government models that they can leverage.
Awesome. Great. With that, I wanted to understand, so what is the vision that government carries in terms of reimagining the whole digitization? If you can share some of the use cases, that'd be great.
Yeah, so for me, reimagining governance is far more powerful than looking at conventional digital transformation. And I'll explain with an example why. If we look at how most governments are embracing digital technologies, or this looking at digital transformation, is by taking what we have today and thinking about how we can do that in the digital world, online or digitally, which is great. It will make your and my life a lot easier, but it is falling short of what we could be looking to get value out of the digital technologies. And I'll use a basic example of a passport. All of us normally use a passport and are familiar with it, so it's easy for me to explain the difference between the transformational mindset versus the reimagining mindset. In the transformation mindset for a passport, we would look at how can we make the application process digital, online, easier, simpler, user experience becomes better. Maybe I can do it from my phone. There's an app for it. So it makes the access point and the application process as easy and as simple as possible. And at the same time, we start to then look at the processing of the application. So once I have applied for it, it goes through some kind of process, which will be applied to obviously make sure that passports are being issued to the right people. and the right information has been presented. So we then start to see focus on how can we make that more automated, digital? Can we use AI and blockchain or machine learning and RPA, etc., as technologies to really automate and make the process more faster and more predictive, more proactive. Then it's about now producing the physical document and making it available, transferring it to you through some mechanism. So all of this, can make our life easy.
Right.
Yeah, but when we take a reimagining approach, we start with asking a fundamental question of what purpose does a passport fulfill? Why does it exist? And in principle, you can say, I'm sure you would agree with me, that it exists to enable travel. I know we use it for other purposes as well. Sometimes it's used as an identification document, but in its real form, true form, why it was produced was to enable travel. So if that's the purpose of a passport, the next question you then should ask yourself when you're looking to reimagine something for the digital age is, how can I enable travel today? And you very quickly come to the conclusion that actually passports have passed their sell-by date because you don't need passports to travel.
Yeah.
Facial recognition, biometrics have enabled you and I to become the passport. So now the problem you're solving for is not how to digitize or transform digitally a passport. It is about a business model change, is how do you get each country to agree on exchange of data in a secure way to enable travel to happen. So if I'm living in Dubai, today I can exit Dubai and enter Dubai without a passport because they have enabled facial recognition as a mechanism. Now, it's still in its, I would say, piloting days, but pretty much we can do that. So I travel quite a lot. I normally come, I stand at the kiosk, it recognizes me, lets me in. If I'm going, it does the same thing. So whilst that's possible, what I can't do is come to India, for example, and enter without a passport. So, but it's still possible. Technology-wise, it's possible for me to enter India if there was an exchange of data between the governments. And it could be also, it doesn't mean that the data needs to sit with you guys about every person in the world. It could be linked to need basis, travel basis. So it pings, it recognizes it, it asks to verify this person, So that's the way I feel that we need to be looking going forward if we truly want to get the value and benefit of the power of technology that we have today.
Wow, great vision. I think all the countries, I think if we all start to reimagining the whole ease of these things, I think we should be able to look at the next transformation around various areas, right?
Absolutely.
Great. My next follow-up question on that is, what are the typical challenges that can be identified or that can be, a challenge to execute the whole transformation strategies with the government that you foresee?
Look, with government or even private sector, any change is a challenge. We as human beings are, creatures of comfort. We want to do the things the way we do, continue doing it, and we don't want to change. So at a psychological level, any change in government is going to be challenging because you will have categories of people, either those who are fearful for their jobs or the work they do. They may feel that they can't operate in this new way. You will have categories of people who don't believe in this change and they will want to be resisting it, stopping it, and they try to even derail it sometimes. And then you'll have categories of people who embrace it. They are, futurist people. They look at the future, they embrace the future, and they want to take on new things. So they will be the champions, and they'll obviously be neutral people who sit somewhere in the middle. So that's first thing to keep in mind, that transformation by its nature is very complex and difficult, and it impacts almost every part of your organization, whether it's your processes, your technology that you're using, the people themselves, the organization structure itself. Take the example I was giving to you about the passport. Let's say we went down that route. What does it mean? It means that potentially you don't need a passport agency, right?
Yeah.
But you have a lot of people who still need to be found jobs. So unless you are thinking of transformation in these things by understanding the impact of your strategies and your plans and trying to mitigate them and make sure that you overcome any challenges that are going to have an impact on people, because we, at the end of the day, will be the makers or breakers of the change. So those are the typical things you will still find in governments around the world. And having been a government a civil servant myself, working as a public servant, I know what it was like when we had these new changes coming, and we're always like thinking, why do we need to change? It's all working well, and because it's going to change my life. So unless we understand and identify the impact on the people, and also we know that how we can drive that change, leadership is very important. Making sure you give these kind of roles to the right people to drive. Strategizing, putting plans together is important, but at the same time, being able to move quick and being agile and not taking years to do something is also important, because the pace at which technology is moving, if we use the conventional waterfall model of project management, by the time we get to the end, things are obsolete. So we need to be embracing more of agile. And that's where I see a bit of a challenge, especially in the government sector, because we're not typically used to working in an agile way.
Yeah.
Not that we don't have the capability, we do. It's just that the model, the policies, and because governments are dealing with public money and public, they have to be more careful. So they are risk averse. So how do you bring those kind of things into government in a measured way, so you don't also create political and policy challenges?
Correct. Also with that, we know that, moving digital, one of the major challenges also about data privacy, cybersecurity, so it is very, very important to, strategize and have advanced technologies to protect government data and public data, right, which lies with the government. To prevent from cyber attacks. What do you think? What are the best practices? I mean, obviously, those are something that needs to be revisited every time, because as we grow with learning through different technologies and solutions to take care of our data, but so are the hackers, right? The whole hacker community is also growing. So what are the best practices that can be followed, or strategies that can be looked at to prevent any cyber attacks?
So this is a very interesting topic, and recently also there have been many incidences where both in private and public sector attacks have happened, and data is stolen, or information which is quite critically stolen. So it's a topic which will not die down, and very logical. The reason for why it won't die down is because we are moving at a faster pace than ever to the digital world. We are moving away from the physical to the virtual space. More and more services, more and more content, more and more information, whether it's on a personal level or on an organization level, is moving into the cloud. It's moving online into digital platforms. So by its very nature, when you are expanding something and is growing at a exponential pace, you are creating more vulnerabilities. So that's one thing we need to keep in mind, that this topic is not going to go away because we are expanding the whole space more and more. How I have seen some take this as a very strategic approach is, rather than fortifying as a first step. So classically, we think about how do you put virus controllers on our laptop, or how do we create firewalls? And that's a model which is important because you're trying to protect from someone coming into attack. But where I feel more time and energy needs to be spent is in this concept of security by design. How do you build in from ground upwards security into everything you do? And it's also a bit of a misnomer that attacks, or let's say cyber attacks and stuff, are purely someone sitting and just doing, ways of penetrating a server. The most of, or many, I won't say most, but many attacks are happening because you and I have somehow given our personal data and very smart people who would ask in random ways 3 or 4 questions at different times to figure out what your password is, for example, on getting some personal data. So that's an area where companies and organizations and governments are lacking a little bit, because they don't focus on how to keep that information secure, how to keep your password secure, and how to, when you're designing digital services or products, how to build ground upwards security into yours rather than trying to fortify once you've built it. It's important to have that as well, but looking at a policy of top down and bottom up will serve you better.
Correct. Great. Mohammed, this has been a great conversation and wonderful insights from your side. My one last question before we end today's episode. Any best practices or any suggestions that you would want to share for our viewers? That'd be great.
I would like to share more of some aspirations I have for governments to keep in mind whilst they go about their journey towards embracing digital technologies. And these are some basic fundamental mindset principles. Number one, rather than taking a technology first led approach, which is taking technology and trying to just make it fit onto something, take a purpose-led or an experience-led first approach. Try to put the user at the center of your thinking, the citizen at the center of your thinking, and design from that perspective. The policies, the strategies, and the services you design will be much more efficient and effective, and will really truly solve some problem. The second is, which I already spoke about, is rather than taking a transformation, take a reimagination route. Try to get to the core of what is it that you're doing, rather than just putting a lot of investment on digitizing a process or a service or a product. Think about what purpose it fulfills and really try to reimagine, because you could save a huge amount of money and redeploy those funds into other things. And number 3 is take what I call inclusive approach, inclusion by design approach. When you're designing and thinking of digital transformation, think of the fact that not everyone is either got access or has got access to digital devices that will enable them, they can afford it, or they're digitally literate. So if by taking a inclusion by design approach, you will think about all of the different channels and all of the different ways that you need to serve those communities who are not today having access. 50% of the world is still not connected, right? So when we take a pure digital approach, we are disenfranchising a huge amount of people. And we should be thinking about, as government especially, that we are looking to build policies for the whole, not just for the few. So that would be my three things. And the final would be is we have an opportunity to change the way governments operate due to the power of digital. As you know, we are all into verticals, but you and I, as a citizen, as a user, want to be able to ideally deal with just one. When it's one government, why do we need to deal with or have to deal with both verticals of maybe 30 or 40 government agencies to live our life, for day to day, or even sometimes layers, federal level, state level, local level. The technology that we have today enables us to create a very simplified connecting point and change the relationship with our citizens to simplify the access and delivery of services. That will be a true game changer for our citizens if we can go down that route. So I shall leave it at that. These are the four key things that I would like to share.
Wonderful, Mohammad. I think great conversation, great insights. Reimagining is the word. It's what we all should look at, then transformation. I think good to have this conversation with you. Thank you once again for joining us on CIO News platform and being part of the Voice of CIO series. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope your audience, your listeners, will get some value from this.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you.